Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is staff. Let's take a moment and look at the definition of this verb. The verb staff means to provide a business or organization with workers. There will be a couple other definitions we'll talk about in just a moment in connection with phrasal verbs, but really this is the primary meaning of this verb and the main way you're going to see it used. You should also know that staff is a regular verb. To make the progressive form of this verb, all I need to do is add ing, and that forms staffing. The past tense and participle forms of this verb can be made by adding ed. Now our base verb, staff, ends with an unvoiced F sound. This means that our ed ending is going to make a T sound, and it should sound like this: staffed, staffed. Okay. Now, as I promised, there is a phrasal verb you might encounter with staff, and that is to staff up. This can have a couple different meanings. One is to hire the necessary members of a particular workforce. So that, again, could be for any type of company or organization. An example of this might be, will you staff up for the holiday season? This is a question someone might ask the owner of a business that is more seasonal in nature. And again, they're asking, are you going to hire more workers? Second way staff up gets used is just to mean to fill a business with employees. An example of this, the restaurant has staffed up for its opening next week. So they have hired and filled their business with the workers that they need. Now, let's move on and practice using our verb of the day in a couple different verb tenses. Today, we're going to start by practicing with the past perfect. We use this verb tense to note that an action was completed in the past, either before a certain period of time or before another action. And really that's the primary reason we have the past perfect, noting something occurred before something else or before a certain time. To make past perfect sentences, our structure is going to stay the same no matter what the subject is. So in the affirmative, we're going to have our subject, then we use the past form of have, which is had, and then the participle form, the verb. You can see this in my example. The company had staffed up too much during an extremely busy year. Now, what comes after this sentence usually is kind of sad, might be announcing layoffs or some type of reduction in the workforce. Now, if you want to make a negative past perfect sentence, what you're going to do there is start with your subject, use had not, and then the participle form the verb. Here's another example. The school hadn't staffed a librarian in more than a decade. Okay. This is something that's happening to a lot of public schools. They just don't have all the funds they need to be able to hire and employ someone to manage the school library. Now let's look at making a yes or no question in the past perfect. To do this, we're going to start with had, then we're going to have our subject, and then we're going to use the ed form of our verb or our participle here since it's a regular verb. Last example for today. Had volunteers staffed the clinic before it received a grant? And this can happen many times as new nonprofits start or begin their existence. They might have all volunteer workers before they have enough funding to pay actual employees. Now let's move on and talk about the present perfect progressive. Many teachers, books, and even YouTube videos here will call this the present perfect continuous, and that's great. It means exactly the same thing. The focus with the present perfect progressive is that we have an action that started in the past and it's continuing into the present. So it's still continuing when I'm speaking or when I'm writing. There's even the possibility that action's going to continue into the future. The reason I like using present perfect progressive is the 3 P's can help me and my students remember that we need 3 parts to make our verb. But something very important here, we need to pay attention to our subject because our verb's going to change just a little bit. So if my subject is I, we, they, or you, I'm going to use have, been, and then the ing form of my verb. If my subject is he, she, or it, I use has been, and then the ing form of the verb. Let's take a look at the first example sentence here. It says, we've been staffing the fitness center accordingly. So here the subject and have been combined into the contraction we've. So I always tell my students, if you're more comfortable saying we have been staffing, that's great. It means the exact same thing. So now again, had the subject been he, right, I would have changed to has been. Right? Small thing to pay attention to there in the present perfect progressive. But let's move on and talk about negative sentences in the present perfect progressive. To do this, again, we've got to pay attention to our subject. Okay, we're going to use, we'll have our subject, we use have or has, then not, then the participle been, and then the ing form of the verb. Here's another example sentence. The Department of Public Safety hasn't been staffing the fire station as often as promised. This sentence might sound a little surprising to some people, but in many small communities, the fire department or fire station exists with volunteers. There may be, in some cases, no paid employees. So if you're kind of wondering about like, how could that be? I think this sentence came from a very small town. So that's what they're describing. Finally, let's look at making a yes or no question in the present perfect progressive. To do this, I'm going to start with have or has, whichever form matches my subject. That subject comes next. Then you're going to see the participle been and then the ing form the verb. Here's the last example. Have they been staffing up during the holiday season? So again, maybe I'm asking about a particular business that gets busier. Here in the United States, we kind of think of holiday season as keeps getting earlier. So maybe November, December, maybe a little bit into January there, where many people are buying lots of things to give as holiday gifts. Now, though, let's move on and talk about some words that are related to our verb staff. And of course, the first thing we're going to talk about today is the noun form of this word. The noun staff can have a number of different meanings. We're just going to talk about 3 today. The first way you'll hear staff used is to refer to all the people who are employed by a particular organization. An example of this might be they have a staff of 15 at that location. So just another way of saying they have 15 employees at that organization. Now, a second way staff gets used is to refer to a long stick that's either used as support when someone's walking. It might be used as some kind of tool or weapon. To help us understand this a little bit, and I apologize, I couldn't find a great picture of this today, but if you look down at the bottom right-hand corner of my notes here, I've got a little picture. The picture is someone we would call a shepherd. You might think of this like sheep farmer, right? And I hope you can see, I'm trying to put my cursor and highlight in yellow, a particular stick. And so you might hear staff used in connection with shepherd. So an example of this word now in a sentence is, the shepherd's staff can be used to manage or even catch sheep. The last way we're going to talk about the noun staff is related to music. And again, I've got a little picture to help us use this. So the 5 parallel lines and then kind of the spaces on sheet music are also commonly referred to as staff. So I've got another little picture here. I'm going to bring my cursor, right? So I hope you can see here, we've got 5 lines here at the top. That would be referred to as staff as well. Now, let's talk about one other related way that the word staff gets used. So sometimes staff is used as a shortened form of the word flagstaff. So perhaps you've heard half staff, and that's when the position of a flag, right, instead of going all the way to the top of a flagpole, now it's being flown kind of in the middle, right? And generally, in the United States in particular, this is done out of respect after an important figure has died. So an example of this might be, flags will fly at half-staff to honor the late governor. And late here is being used to describe someone who has passed. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.